Pentagon is suspending its program to arm Syrian rebels and will look for other ways now to help battle ISIS.
Defense Secretary Ash Carter says the United States will now provide equipment and weapons to a group of vetted Syrian rebel leaders to try and help them reclaim some territory controlled by ISIS.
When word leaked out recently that the hundreds of millions of dollars spent to train Syrian rebels was creating a fierce force of maybe a dozen or so, and they weren't that good, the weight was on for the Obama administration to go public and take the heat for a massive failure. Done and done. So where do we go from here? And how much more waste will there be before somebody comes up with a real plan to get the job done in Syria and the rest of the Middle East? Break it down. Our guest is former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense during the George H.W. Bush administration, Jed Babbin. Jed, I want to thank you so much for joining us. And if we're going to begin this conversation, do we need to say flat out, we have to call this a massive failure? There is nothing else to say about it.
Well, yeah, but it's a long string of massive failures here, Ed, so this is not exactly big news. This program was ill-conceived, it was ill-run, and it could not possibly have succeeded. So relying on that to do what we are otherwise, well, not doing in the Middle East was a big mistake in that respect. And that's the real problem here. There's a lot of things that we can do in the Middle East. There's a lot of things we should be doing outside of the Middle East that will help deal with the Middle East problem of Putin. But we're not doing any of those things.
Jed, what is it then, in your opinion, that, and we've heard a lot of people give us different opinions, what we need to do. There's strike now, wait, let Putin basically burn himself out. But what would be, if we had somebody else in charge, the smart thing to do right now?
Well, the smart thing to do right now would be not focus on Syria as a response to Putin. The way to do that is to get him unfocused from Syria and unfocused on some of his other problems, just to put him off balance.
So how do you do that then? How do you unfocus him?
Lots of ways to do it. The easiest way is to put a massive military exercise. We used to do something called Reforger in Germany, return forces to Germany, and we parachute in a whole division and do something like that in Ukraine. The Ukraine fighting is still going on. Putin still has designs of taking over the whole country. Why don't we just say to the Ukrainians, hey, you know, we really have neglected you guys. Why don't we put 10,000 troops in there for a couple of months and see what we can do? You know, that's the kind of thing that I would do to take the heat off of other places. You know, really, quite frankly, Ed, the Syrians are not worth us fighting over. The Israelis are, Lebanon maybe, but the Syrians, I mean, they've been a state sponsor of terrorism since 1979. If the terrorists change hands to put one terrorist in charge rather than another, what's the diff?
Well, let me stop you there. Is that where we then have to start this conversation? We picked the wrong people. They don't want to fight. They don't have the will to fight that we need behind us in order to basically grab a country back. And we've got to stop screwing around with the people who aren't going to be, let me say it simply, almost in Trumpism, winners, if you will, people who want to fight.
Well, but the real point here is there are no people over there with whom we can ally ourselves that are reliable in any respect. We saw that in Iraq. We saw that in Afghanistan. When are we finally going to learn that we're just not capable of picking magically some little group and putting some arms and some training in them and have them just win things? We've got Russia and Iran fully engaged in Syria. If we want to do something in Syria, fine. I don't think we have a national security interest sufficient to do that. But if you want to do that, fine. But let's not pretend this is a proxy war. This is not a proxy war. It's the Russians flying Russian aircraft. It's the Iranians with Iranian troops on the ground. If we're going to do something, and I just don't know that we need to do it in Syria. There are a lot of other places to do it. But if you want to do it, let's recognize it for what it is, and let's do a real force, and let's take on the people who are really fighting there, the Russians and the Iranians.
30 seconds. A senior defense official says we're going to concentrate on the, quote, vetting of key leaders of groups we've identified in Syria who are fighting ISIL, unquote. Is that still unbelievably wrong?
Well, yeah. And in fact, it's unbelievably wrong because we don't learn. You know, we're going to come up with this new magical selection and a new bunch of groups that are really going to be good guys for the next 10 days. And there's going to be, instead of 5 of them, you know, we're going to have 25 of them. Big stinking deal. We need to focus on our national security interests. We do not have one other than removing Assad. The Russians and the Iranians are not going to permit us to do that. So if we want to go through them, That's one thing. If we don't, then that's a whole different selection. I'm for acting other places to put Putin off balance and put pressure on him rather than fight for Syria, which frankly just isn't worth it.
I think it probably would be good to say right now, and a lot of people could agree and shake their heads, yes, unfortunately, that after this and what we've seen happen here, Vladimir Putin is probably sitting back having a very good laugh at our expense, because that seems to be exactly what we are handing dictators these days. Jed Babbin, always a pleasure, my friend. Want to thank you so much for joining us. We will do it again. Now, the Russians would say they have no fear about anything, be it big bad America or what they're currently facing in Syria. But that big bear has a healthy dose of fear over the Middle Eastern dictatorship they are currently propping up, and a lot more. Welcome back the esteemed professor of Middle East Studies at Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, Florida, author of Syria, the United States and the War on Terror in the Middle East. Professor Robert Rabil joins us again in the studio.
Thank you, Ed. It's always a pleasure,
my friend.
Thank you.
Let's start off by talking about the Obama administration saying no more, we are not going to train the Syrian rebels. A lot of people saw this coming. Pretty much was a waste from the beginning, wasn't it?
Well, it was a waste because we had a half-hearted measure. We didn't go full, and also our allies, mainly Turkey and Saudi Arabia, I don't think they supported it well. And more so, what happened is that those that we trained and we equipped, somehow, either they were defeated by ISIS and al-Nusra, or they joined them. So at the end of the day, we look and we say, what's going on here? And then it was expected indeed. And today, as I hear, they said, listen, we are quitting that.
All right, let's talk about this.
And also you have the Russian,
and also
you had the Russian equation as well. You had Russia there now. So really now, from the position of the administration, they said, okay, where are we going now?
They haven't been going anywhere for a while. They may as well keep it up. They do the exact same thing.
Yes.
You mentioned Russia. Your recent article, this is what Russia really fears in Syria. You pointed out a couple of things. What's the biggest thing they fear? You don't think of the Russians fearing much.
Well, they have strategic concerns and they have strategic ambition. Mainly, the one concern is they are worried about radical Islam moving into the heartland of Russia. Why? You have a population of Muslim in Russia that is growing. It's between 20 to 24 million Muslims. And they embrace a moderate version of Islam. Mainly, it's Hanafi, Shafi'i, and Sufi Muslims. Now, recently, he has seen Putin himself, Wahhabism and Salafism moving not only in the Caucasus, but also moving in the heartland of Russia, and he's extremely worried. So here he has a place in Syria where he can fight them, given the fact that many of the fighters in Syria, jihadi, comes from the Caucasus.
So there is a fear in Russia about terrorism coming to them, because it's funny, you hear some people here in the States say, oh, don't worry about it, there's really no terrorist fears moving into Russia. They're wrong, aren't they?
Oh, they are. Of course they are wrong. Mainly they are worried about radical Islam moving in. And once radical Islam move in, of course they're going to do something. And he is worried about what's going to happen next. He has a large contingent of Muslims there. And this is why he is promoting the idea to being Russian. Not to be, Russian and Orthodox Russian. No, a Russian. Whether you are Muslims or Greek Orthodox, you are Russian.
And one thing you pointed out in here, and I have this highlighted,
yes, please.
Putin has positioned himself as the protector of the minorities in the greater Middle East.
Yes.
It's a political move by Putin.
Yes.
He wants to be seen as the savior.
Yes, as a matter of fact, yes. If you go back to history, to 1774, this is when Tsarist Russia defeated the Ottoman Empire in the Crimea, and immediately after that, they signed what is called a capitulation agreement, whereby Tsarist Russia became the protector of the Greek Orthodox community throughout the Ottoman Empire. And that role always Russia played. Until the Soviet Union, it supported Hafez al-Assad regime as a client state. So now you have Christians, you have Druze, you have Alawi. They look at Russia and say, listen, what happened to the other world? What happened to the United States? What happened to Great Britain? What happened to France that protected the Catholics? What happened to Great Britain that protected the Druze? No longer there. So what you have now, he has moved in and filled the void. And he knows that the minorities, they could be a foil against radical Islam and a bridge for him, for his influence. And this is where his influence, mainly, and what I mentioned as his strategic concern, this is where it is in sync. It dovetails with the Iranian strategic concern to have an outlet from Tehran to the Mediterranean, mainly to the Mediterranean ports, of 3 ports especially, Tartus, Beirut, and Tyre. And here, this is where you have this common strategy, or strategies with common grounds between Russia and Iran.
10 seconds. Do you fear Afghanistan again will happen to Russia?
As a matter of fact, I fear it's an uphill battle, but it's not Afghanistan, because he's going to have minorities, especially the Shia, who's going to be with him.
There it is. The key to getting the minorities on your side and being seen as the big savior. That's his plan. Don't forget, once again, the book is called Syria, the United States and the War on Terror in the Middle East. It is a fascinating read. And with what's going on in Syria right now, trust me, this is going to become the primer for what maybe the American government needs to look at as well. Professor,
thank you. It's my pleasure, Ed.
Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again real soon. Stay with us. The fastest 60 minutes of news, The Hardline, continues after this.